and welcome to Crime Bites, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz, and today is True Crime Tuesday. So today's case was taken from a Facebook post that took me down quite the little rabbit trail. And I'll show it to you after I'm done telling you these stories. But today we're going to focus primarily on the stories of two young ladies, each who committed a Section 18 assault in England. Although their attacks against another individual were fairly similar in many ways, and the same charge was pressed in both instances, the discrepancies between the way that each lady was sentenced for their crimes is what makes today's story bizarre. And brings up the question, how just is our justice system? Well, in today's stories, we're hopping across the pond, as they say, and looking at two cases that took place in England, whose judicial system is somewhat similar to ours in the U.S., for better or worse. And we have certainly had cases over here in the good old U.S. of A. that make us ask the same question, along with another question. Do we have a problem with privilege? So let's look at our young ladies. Their names are Lavinia and Michaela. Lavinia has blonde hair and Michaela has dark hair, but otherwise, at first glance, they're both stunningly attractive young women. Let me start by introducing you to Lavinia. I really like that name. Lavinia was a young student who was having her boyfriend Thomas over for the evening. She had met him on Tinder and they had been seeing each other for a few months, and they were both pretty excited about one another. Now, Lavinia had been in a prior relationship that was abusive, and as a result, she had started abusing cocaine and alcohol. So when he arrived at Lavinia's, Thomas found that she had been drinking and using before he had even arrived. He attempted to discourage her from drinking or using more, as she was already in a bit of an inebriated state. She was not really wanting this sort of intervention at that point, and it got to the point where Thomas didn't know what to do. So in sort of a desperate move to kind of get her to slow down, he placed a Skype call to her mother. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in this type of situation, but having your boyfriend or girlfriend intervene with one of your parents about something like this is not really a fun situation. And as you can imagine, Lavinia was not thrilled by the direction that Thomas had taken this evening. So she flew off, grabbed the laptop and threw it at him. Then she chucked any glasses she could find, a jam jar. Then she punched him in the face before grabbing a bread knife and just stabbing him in the leg. She also injured two of his fingers while she was stabbing him. He would survive the attack, obviously not without injury. Lavinia would attempt to stab herself with the same knife, but Thomas would end up disarming her before the emergency services arrived. Now let's meet Michaela. Michaela was a 19-year-old single mother, and tonight she was getting ready for a night out on the town with her sisters. They had a bit to drink already when they got to the nightclub in question, looking to meet up with some of their friends. Unfortunately, when they got there, they literally walked into a full-out brawl where people were smashing bottles and everything. She got in the middle of it and ended up kicking a stranger with her stiletto heel on. She injured her in the eye socket and other parts of her face. To make things even worse, she would end up facing a second Section 18 assault charge that one of the victim's friends fabricated in an attempt to make what happened this night even worse on her. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Now, Lavinia and Michaela would both be tried and sentenced for a Section 18 assault, which is also known as grievous bodily harm. This offense involves injuring a person with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. So it's used if you severely injure a person but don't kill them. It's considered serious enough that you could end up with a life sentence for this type of assault. If you do listen to the two stories about these assaults, they're both pretty terrible, but neither one seemed to be premeditated. Both ladies caused serious bodily harm to another individual with an improvised weapon. Lavinia did use a knife, but I believe a bread knife is the equivalent to a butter knife over here, and so she must have gotten him pretty good with it. I think he had a pretty bad cut and needed some stitches, and two of his fingers got injured pretty badly. Both ladies felt bad for the harm that they caused to another person while they were under the influence. You would think that they would receive somewhat similar sentences in court, but that's not what happened at all. So, just knowing what we know now, which lady do you think might have gotten off a little easier? Hard to say in my opinion, based on the crimes that they committed. Now, let me tell you a couple more details about these two ladies. Michaela was raised in a council estate. Her parents were heroin addicts and she became a mom when she was 17. Lavinia, on the other hand, was from a well-off family and was studying at Oxford to become a heart surgeon. Now, knowing this, which lady do you think might have gotten off a little easier? So when they were tried, Lavinia would plead guilty to unlawful wounding, while Michaela would plead not guilty, stating that she did not intend to harm anyone. Now, she does admit to causing the injuries that she did cause, but she does not admit intent, which makes sense. She was reacting quickly in a very intense situation while being in a drunken state. It makes sense when she says she didn't mean to seriously injure someone. So to make things worse for her, the second Section 18 assault charge that Michaela faced was for smashing a bottle over another girl's face. Her accuser went as far as to get witnesses to testify about it, but they did end up conflicting each other, and she ended up being terrified she would be found guilty on both charges, but after everything was said and done, she only ended up being convicted of the charge that she was in fact responsible for, intent or not. So, as far as jail time, the ladies were given different numbers. Lavinia would receive 10 months and Michaela would receive 2 years. This already seems a little bit questionable, but it gets worse. Let me show you the Facebook post that I saw that led me down this little spiral. You heard it here. If you did gifted and talented in school, you are allowed to stab one person. Followed by, if I knew skipping jail time was one of the perks of the gifted program, I would have made an effort. And the headline reads, Oxford student too bright for prison is spared jail for stabbing boyfriend. Okay. So yes, this is what sent me on this little adventure. When the judge gave Lavinia her 10-month sentence, which, mind you, is less than half the length of the sentence that Michaela received, he went further to suspend it by at least 18 months so that it would not disrupt her studies. Michaela was sent to jail the day she was sentenced, even though she was under the impression from her lawyer that even if she was given jail time at sentencing, she would at least be able to go home and say goodbye to her then 4-year-old daughter. She was absolutely crushed when she couldn't. And on top of this, Lavinia broke her bail conditions by both leaving the country and texting her ex to apologize for stabbing him, even though she was giving the equivalent of a no-contact order. Instead of being reprimanded, the sentencing judge viewed this more as a sign of remorse than a blatant disregard for his orders. This is part of what he told Lavinia during sentencing. It seems to me that this was a one-off, a complete one-off. To prevent this extraordinary young lady from not following her long-held desire to enter the profession she wishes to would be a sentence which would be too severe. What you did will never, I know, leave you, but it was pretty awful, and normally it would attract a custodial sentence, whether it is immediate or suspended. So, although she did break her bail. In the 9 months between the attack and sentencing, Lavinia did seek help for her alcohol and drug addiction, and this did serve as a mitigating factor in her sentencing, as it should have. The judge also was attempting to take into consideration the contributions that she could continue to bring to society and how sentencing her away could ultimately squash that. This wasn't really an understatement either. She was published in a bunch of medical journals, was talked about as if she could win a Nobel Prize one day, and one of her character references said that her observations while at Oxford led to funding a whole research department at the university. The problem is that brilliant people can make bad choices, and being brilliant shouldn't excuse them from the consequences of their bad choices. So, what ultimately happened to Lavinia? After her initial sentencing, she attempted to appeal the sentence. She did stay clean during the 18th month postponement, and then she tried to appeal the sentence for Milan, but lost her appeal. Other than that, I couldn't find much more information on her, other than that she did formally withdraw herself from Oxford and was reportedly dating a Russian billionaire and is possibly living in England with him. I did not find anything about her actually serving her 10-month sentence. Now, these topics are pretty tricky. Let's look at these two ladies again, because while researching, I came across a lot of opinions. Everything from pretty privilege to woman privilege to rich privilege, which honestly, I think unless you're living under a log, you'd have to admit that these things do exist, but to what extent? And as a society, are we working hard enough to lessen the gaps? I digress. Anyhow, these are both stunningly gorgeous women. What separated them was wealth, and I don't really want to say intelligence because Michaela is an incredibly smart lady, and we're going to get into that more in a tiny bit. But apparently Lavinia was one of those, if not genius, darn close to it types, which frankly is rare and deserves special treatment in some instances, but does it deserve this kind of special treatment? I would say probably not. However, I do want to say that the judge did follow the guidelines for sentencing. In both cases, actually, the judges used their discretion, passed on the facts that they had on the time, and made a decision that was within their power. Although, because Michaela's incident happened before Lavinia's, she couldn't use that decision to sway her judge, although women finding themselves in similar situations might be able to now. Looking at these cases separately, you could say justice was done in both cases. When you slide them next to each other, however, you might start to question that statement. Should Lavinia's judgment have been harsher? Should Michaela's have been more lenient? I read one source that stated that Michaela's judge wasn't even aware that she was a single mother until the day that she was tried and sentenced and sent away, yet that didn't seem to sway the decision. So I'll leave you with that question. And on this hunt, I found so many other examples of cases that were similar in offense, yet remarkably different in the legal outcome. How just is our justice system? I might do another comparison video like this in the future, possibly next week with all the nonsense I did find on this hunt. We'll see though, I do have a few ideas. But for today's positive note, I do want to come back to Michaela, because in today's story there is no denying she got the short end of the stick here, so to speak. Society is rough for single mothers, but after spending 2 years in jail, Michaela had to attempt to reintegrate herself both back into society and into her daughter's life. Luckily, she did get some help from her supportive family members and was actually able to fulfill her dream of attending a university. She earned her honors degree and an MSc in applied criminology. She is now the National Patient Engagement Lead for CARE UK's Health and Justice Service. This service provides healthcare to over 50 of England's prisons. She uses her experience to try and shape others' views on the criminal justice system, specifically for mothers who find themselves in prison. So, bravo to Michaela, and because today's topic is a touchy one, I do want to throw out to just try and be kind in the comments, if I even get any. And until next week, please stay safe out there. Bye!